Now on the war itself, which started in 1839 and would end only in 1842, I'm not going to go into most of the details of the conflict, save to say that after a very slow beginning and negotiations of several limited but ultimately abortive pieces, it ended with the utter defeat and humiliation of the Qing. It's enough to say that Manchu troops proved incapable of dealing with British arms on land, and Chinese war junks were sunk with great regularity by British men of war. When, in the summer of 1842, a British force under the command of Henry Pottinger decided to strike boldly up the Yangtze, they found the way remarkably open. And in August 1842, their ships reached the outskirts of Nanjing and prepared to shell the city. Here, the interplay of foreign relations and domestic rule came to the fore. The Daoguang Emperor understood, though quite frankly it's doubtful that the British did, that if such a symbolic city fell to the enemy, his mandate would be in jeopardy. The emperor felt he had no choice but to accept British terms. Lin Zexu, whose policies were now blamed for the disaster, took the consequences and was led into exile in chains, his fortune confiscated. The result of the war was the Treaty of Nanking, of Nanjing, the first of what would later be called unequal treaties, a treaty that forced harsh concessions on the Qing. Hong Kong Island was ceded to the British in perpetuity. 5 ports would open by treaty: Canton, Xiamen, Fuzhou, Ningbo, and Shanghai, to trade, to foreign consuls, to businessmen, and to missionaries. An indemnity of 21 million silver dollars would be paid to England for the cost of the war. The Kohong monopoly would be abolished. The Qing would exact only moderate tariffs and would limit inland transit duties. Foreign officials would be given equal status and access to Chinese officials. And British subjects would have the right to be tried by their own consuls, the right of extraterritoriality. The treaty showed that the war was in fact about many things. It was about trade and its opening, about principles of sovereignty, if not yet formal diplomatic relations on an equal basis, about conceptions of extraterritoriality. The treaty did not mention opium. This might have been in part to Great Britain's embarrassment at the involvement of opium and opium traders to this conflict. But perhaps it was also because, with all the other concessions, the British didn't have to. Opium was not formally legalized, but neither was its import stopped. Trafficking continued as tacitly legal through the rest of the 19th century, reaching a height of not 20,000, not 40,000, but eventually 200,000 chests of opium a year, and gradually imports would be supplanted by domestically grown Chinese opium. The war was about many things, but it was crucially about opium. This is how it would be remembered in China, and this is why it would be so resented over so many generations. It was not a pretty business, no matter how much British free traders sought to portray this as the inevitable opening of China to British commerce and thereby enlightenment. I prefer another opinion, and let me close here with the words of a different moral bent, the words of Gladstone, whose intellectual and moral reactions to this trade were not far from that of the Chinese moralist Lin Zexu. Gladstone said this in the parliamentary debate on going to war. A war more unjust in its origin, a war more calculated to cover this country with permanent disgrace, I do not know and I have not read of. The right honorable gentleman opposite, speaking here of Macaulay, spoke of the British flag waving in glory at Canton. That flag is hoisted to protect an infamous contraband traffic. And if it were never hoisted, except as it is now hoisted on the coast of China, we should recoil from its sight in horror.